In the plane, just before we jumped, I finally came to the conclusion that I had to swallow my fears, take charge and lead these men. It seems fate has a dark sense of humor. I'm a man with hell standing between me and my men. No matter. Not even hell will stop me.
So, Brothers in Arms, or as the French would call it, les frères dance, les bras.
Pouvez-vous nous dire où nous sommes?
The gameplay we're looking at right now is from Road to Hill 30, which is the first Brothers in Arms game. It is a tactical first-person shooter where you get to control your squads, and where the weapons are so inaccurate you will have every incentive to play tactically. Locations are taken from real life, and the encounters are designed to imitate actual historical encounters. With this, it tries to capture that fundamental block of tactical maneuvers known as the kill chain, or the 4 Fs. Find the enemy, fix the enemy, flank the enemy, and except that the whim of war spares no one, not even these poor souls. It is easy to set up even though it came out in 2005, and outside of some small segments I could nitpick, there really aren't any significant flaws in either presentation or gameplay. I played this on the anniversary of the Battle of Carentan, which is included in Road to Hill 30, which shouldn't be a surprise considering it covers the 101st Airborne Division. Yes, just like Band of Brothers. And it does feel like Band of Brothers, the game. It is gritty and it is grounded, and it tries to be faithful to reality while still offering an entertaining experience. I only wish the writing devoted a bit more attention to the characters, which would have made it a proper war drama.
Baker, I pegged you wrong. First I thought you were a shy, poetic young man. Turns out you're a shy, poetic young man who kills everyone who gets in his way. That's a downright admirable quality.
Well, then comes Brothers in Arms, Hell's Highway, or BIAHH for short, also pronounced as BIA. A direct sequel to Road to Hill 30, this one improves the graphics, simplifies some of the mechanics, and dials the story up to 11, which is a convenient segue because the first time I played this was in 2011, and I thought it was amazing. For some reason or another though, I hadn't replayed it since, until this year. To be specific, I played this again in the spring. I actually have somewhat of a tradition to play World War II games around Easter time. And of course I would. Springtime is sunny and warm and nostalgic, and I really hate German people. Sunny and warm and nostalgic, and it makes me think of sunny and warm gaming memories, which for me happen to include a lot of World War II games. And keep in mind, a lot of important events from World War II did take place in the spring, like the fall of Berlin, the invasion of Okinawa, and the Battle of Leningrad, which was the spring of '44. Hey, if you got that reference, I might have a book for you. So anyway, I had a somewhat peculiar experience returning to this title. I used to remember it as one of the best World War II games I've ever played, and I've played plenty. But as I went into it again, I realized it has so many flaws that it began to feel as if I'd gotten stuck in some kind of advanced Mandela effect, which happens when you slip into a parallel universe where you used to have poor taste in games when you're younger. Then again, there is no shame in being failed by one's memories. Where it does get interesting is that I still regard it as one of the best World War II games I've had the chance to experience, and so in full knowledge of these flaws. And I can even make a bolder case for it now that I'm aware of them. So where from this claim to greatness? Nowhere. I made this video to cope. Well, depending on your attention span, you will find out in about 40 or so minutes. So let's do this.
Previously in Brothers in Arms.
The first thing that greets you in this one is not the gameplay, nor is it the graphics. It is the narrative, or the presentation that shapes it. You see, this is a family game. Son. Not in the sense that you play it with your family, but in the sense that you play as a family.
Dad told me every soldier has two families. Those you raise, and those you raise hell with.
You are Sergeant Matthew Baker, not just in name but in gameplay as well. You control Baker, and you control Baker as he commands his team. That is the major mechanic in the Brothers in Arms series. In addition to being a shooter, it is also a tactical shooter. Friendly NPCs are not just effective, but also essential to winning. And these are not just nameless RTS units, these are actual characters relevant to the story. This is not just some random corporal I'm ordering around. He's the guy who saves Baker's life from the German sniper. And also the guy with a disreputable sister.
You spend more time on your back than Paddock's sister!
The narrative will make sure to let you know who they are. This one person is a friend, and this other person is a good soldier but kind of shady. And this one is still a kid. They all have their backstories, and their actions further on are consistent with their writing at the onset of the episode. But before we get to see all that, there is something else that is happening in the present. Yeah, it seems that this family game is not just about the good side of family. Baker is devastated whenever he loses a soldier, and it looks like that is not a rare occurrence. Most of us know the outcome of World War II, so there can't be much storytelling in that sense, but where the setting can allow for suspense is in the lives and fates of individuals caught up in the conflict. This is what we call war drama, not only because it is a war drama, but also because it is war and there is drama, and Hell's Highway happens to be just that. In comes Baker's best friend to save him, he helps him up, and now they're fighting out of the burning building. This serves as the tutorial for basic commands, and so far it plays like a normal first-person shooter with a third-person cover system. Compared to the average shooter, it is a bit less smooth in as far as it aims for a little more realism, and compared to its direct predecessors, it is way more forgiving, as you can get away with a lot more. Your weapons don't sway as much and your enemies don't shoot as accurately, so it has been improved in some ways and it has regressed in others, but overall it tends to work as intended. Just as you're about to get out, you have an encounter with Providence. By the way, is it too late to take back what I said about hating German people? Because they don't actually... Never mind. And so it begins. Brothers in Arms, Hell's Highway. Not ominous sounding at all. The game is set during Operation Market Garden, which if you're not aware is the one that the Allies lost. But the outcome of the operation is not that important for this particular story. The historical context, though accurate, is just a background or a testing ground for the characters and the challenges they face. And it is during these opening segments that you're introduced to one very important question.
What is it that makes a great soldier? Is it his brain or his heart?
Keep that in the back of your head for later. And so it begins. Again, it is Operation Market Garden, the war will be over by Christmas, and we go in on a sunny day feeling as optimistic as you damn well should. And so far I like what I see. Yes, it is 2008 graphics, but the attention to detail is spot on. Uniforms, architecture, environment, art, this kind of quality does not age. The most impressive thing though is the ambient. If you think this looks a bit too sunny for a World War II game, don't worry, we'll see what the game does with it later. So we skip the tutorial, we meet the resistance informant, and we encounter a squad of 2 Germans standing there. Evilly. And here is something else I must mention about the graphics. That's right, this game has gore. You see, back in 2008, developers were not thinking, how do we make barely playable Unreal Engine 5 tech demos marketable? Rather, they were thinking, how do we make this virtual world imitate the real world? And one thing the real world happens to have are physics. Brothers in Arms is no exception, and it extrapolates this concept to limbs. And it is glorious. Now, I'm not necessarily an enjoyer of gore, but I do think that gore can be used to a good effect in presentations of war, especially if you want to accentuate its horrors, by making them look cool. Don't question it, it's art. And yes, you can turn it off if it bothers you. You also get destructible cover, and this does factor into the gameplay. But back to the situation at present. Now, there are a few ways to go about this part. I could definitely grenade these people, but I'd be wasting a grenade on an easy target. I could also try and mow them down with a Thompson. But that doesn't sound like something a sergeant would do. So I'm going to order my squad to the bunker behind them, move to the flank, and tell my men to open fire.
Fire now!
And that's what you get for standing there, evilly. Now that they've heard the gunshots, their friends will come over to engage us. So we'll use my MG squad to suppress them as they circle around to the side and attack them when they have no cover. And that is more or less the gameplay loop of Hell's Highway. You move to a new location, you study the map, and you go on to use a suppress and flank approach to take out the enemy. Again, it is the so-called kill chain, or the 4 Fs. Find the enemy, fix the enemy, flank the enemy, and acknowledge that they're also human beings just like you, caught in the tragedy of war. Ordering units around is very easy, by the way. They control like RTS units, or like 2 control groups of RTS units, and most of the time their work is intended. You will spend the majority of the game commanding 2 squads, one of which is more effective at suppression and the other is better at getting close to the enemy. And this is very well done. The mechanics may be simple, but every encounter plays out differently. And that includes things that may happen at the spur of the moment, scripted or otherwise, which means you'll need to adapt your strategy on the spot. This part is a good example. We're out in the open and all of a sudden there's a German patrol coming our way. If you go about it hastily and try to flank right away, you might find yourself running out of cover, among other things. Attack too early and they will retreat behind cover, but wait too long and the chaos you create will be too much for you to be able to control. So you need to be patient at one moment and decisive the next. It is up to your tactical genius to tell you which is which. And while level 7 design tools give you the opportunity to flank, you will seldom come across parts that feel like they were designed as overt game elements. The layout, while always offering a flanking route, is not of the type that gives you a perfect angle. It is organic and usually diagonal rather than perpendicular, which leads me to my next point. Reflexes and aim do matter. Hell's Highway is still half-shooter, so you cannot play through it without engaging the enemy yourself. Now, the shooting mechanics are decent, but they can definitely feel a bit clunky. In fact, they are clunky, and usually not in a good way. Sprinting is slow and it has tank controls. Vaulting over cover is but one facet of poor decision making, and you cannot go prone. And you may or may not encounter glitches that break checkpoints. The game tries to get you to use its third-person cover system, but this isn't always optimal. Not to mention, playing on Authentic disables the crosshair. It feels less like sloppiness for the sake of realism and more like realism for the sake of inconvenience. The biggest offender, though, is no doubt the FOV. Not only is it too narrow, but none of the fixes are permanent and definite fixes. The one on PC Gaming Wiki causes a slight stutter when aiming down the sights, and it also breaks sniper scopes. It says here citation needed, so here's your proof. Disabling the zooming in might make the aiming a bit smoother, but the narrow FOV has a tendency to return on its own. In my experience, the tweak is too much work for something that only barely qualifies as an improvement. So you might think that this is perhaps a controller game, provided you play at TV distance. And while it is playable with a controller, the aim acceleration introduces its own problems, namely aim acceleration. So this is something I did not remember about Hell's Highway. It is not the easiest to get running the way you want it. But you know what? That's okay, because we're back in the game, and now we have a bazooka squad. Now it may not be the most realistic of additions, however, I'm not complaining. And yes, they can destroy cover too. What's that? The Germans have a machine gun nest in the steeple? Well, I have a bazooka squad and a serious disregard for European architectural heritage. We fight some more and we emerge at a part of town that is relatively safe. It seems convincingly quiet, the natives are expressing their gratitude, and
lighten up, Corian. It's just a...
Who in the world celebrates directly in front of enemy artillery? What are you people, Dutch? What are you people, high on drugs? Yeah, it doesn't go too well. And here we're introduced to a dispute between these two characters. The kid is idealistic and wants to help people, and his superior is not very good at explaining to him why his place is with the squad. They both did right, but the former is naive and the latter comes off as boomerish. This will come back to haunt them both.
We don't have time for your shit!
So we fight some more, and now we're doing a solo section. These are not that good. They're not bad, but it's brothers in arms trying to be Medal of Honor, all the while lacking the mechanics of Medal of Honor. In sections like these, the otherwise tactical Brothers in Arms subverts its own subversion of the FPS formula. Not only is it uninteresting to play, but it also ends up hurting the narrative, or at least its credibility as a serious game. War is hell and also impossible to live through on your own, unless you're indoors, where the AI doesn't work. So we've cleared the house, and now we're back to proper combat. There is not much to say about this part of the game other than, yes, it is very entertaining. You push on, you order your troops around, and you think of but two things. What is the ideal flanking route, and do I want to kill these people myself like a psychopath, or would I rather get the bazooka team to do it, and revel in the gore like a normal person? But we need to talk about the next level. The introductory cinematics here actually reference the death of a real historical figure. This is Lieutenant Colonel Cole. It does not describe the event exactly as I understand it to have happened, but its purpose here is to highlight something else.
Why would he do that? Why would he do something so goddamn reckless?
He saved a lot of lives, Red.
And now how many will die because he isn't around to lead them? It's not about one battle, man.
Would you prefer he was still around with nothing to lead instead? What's the life of one officer worth to you? 20 men? 40?
You know damn well I value.
Everything all
Now,
right
it
here?
may sound like a cliché dilemma for some, but this dialogue in particular serves to accentuate character, not the debate itself. And you'll see why this matters later. The writing in Hell's Highway makes subtle nods to the central theme that lead you to the answer while keeping overt statements at a minimum, so it is important to keep track of character consistency.
Keep the war out there.
And speaking of character consistency,
Oh, should I go get a ruler? My money's on Roselli.
believe it or not, that joke is consistent with Roselli's model.
Could I lug around if I had 20 pounds?
So we go out on a mission to avenge Cole, and this is a point where the game gets a little artsy. It's subtle, but it's there. Did you hear that? It is just quiet enough to miss. And it is not aligned by any soldier on this particular battlefield. It is actually Baker remembering something from Road to Hill 30.
You want me? Fucking take me! Take me!
This is the point at which the memories from Normandy begin to haunt him. You may consider it an early symptom.
Got him!
I did not edit that, by the way. That's what Paddock says when he lands a shot. This game is so ahead of its time it quotes memes that will come out a decade later. It also has zoomer here. And do take note of the ambient. Now that we've started taking casualties, it is no longer sunny. And the grayness is not just clouds. There's a good deal of smoke and explosions and general chaos. The initially optimistic campaign is beginning to take on a different tone. Pun partially intended. I can't help it. And this darkening will only progress. But first, you get to have more fun fighting through the streets. It really is impressive how quickly these controls become second nature, as you seamlessly change between fighting the enemy and commanding your two squads. And I like that, because I get to shoot people and I get to tell everybody what to do. And I like that, because it is a first-person shooter and a real-time tactics game at the same time. And we don't have a lot of those. It is the same basic formula, and it is just as satisfying when you can pull it off. You find the enemy, fix the enemy, flank the enemy, and accredit their valor in serving their country to the end. The pacing is very solid so far. It balances the action you want with the story it wants to tell very well. At one point you're contemplating the motifs of the narrative, and at another point you're contemplating a repeal in one of the 10 Commandments. I'll let you guess which. The part that follows though is a point where the game loses its luster for a while. It is the factory level, where you get the barrel magazine neutral grip Thompson. This is a decently accurate, low recoil, 50 bullet, fully automatic, high rate of fire submachine gun. It essentially allows you to hold down the trigger and know that at least one of your bullets will hit. And it kind of makes all of the other weapons obsolete. But we'll cover the gunplay later. The layout of the level itself is not very good. Verticality of the map messes with the artificial intelligence, and what I said about the organic design of flanking routes does not apply here. You get some clearly artificially set up arenas. This level feels too gamey compared to the rest of the game. There is a point where the characters board an elevator to conceal a loading screen. There is a point where the characters board an elevator to reach the top floor, and the writing is self-conscious enough to comment on how stupid that is.
We just killed the crowds that came off this elevator.
Which means they're probably waiting at the top.
I know.
Oh god, we're really stupid.
I know!
They do not get ambushed as the door opens, but there are Germans firing Panzerschrecks right to the side. Yes, and doors. And it ends with a stationary sniper section. A level like this might work in Wolfenstein or Medal of Honor, but it has no place in a game that tries to convey a grounded experience. It kind of plays out like a gamer dream. So I'm in this factory with an Al Capone SMG and I need to kill all the Nazis. So we ride an elevator and there's a German destroying boxes with a rocket launcher. And then we get to the roof and I look at a crashing plane from my sniper scope. And then I save this kid and the town celebrates because we freed them. Anyway, can we make a level from that? I bet it's historical. There is also a tank section. It's not too bad. You drive the tank slowly and you slowly shoot at people at a distance. It is not challenging in a good way. In fact, it is not challenging at all, nor does it feel like a power fantasy relief. It is just there, and it contributes nothing to anything. But I can't really complain when it is just 3 minutes long. By the way, does anyone happen to know a good brand for electronics? I might need a new beard trimmer. Or any other piece of electronics really. I'm just looking for a brand. And so we're back in town. The sun is back up, the people rejoice, and the teenage character does what every teenager in his place would do. He tries to romance a low poly girl. The soldiers camp just outside of town, and Dawson approaches Baker for a chat. Apparently, Baker knows something he is not telling, and Dawson is onto him. And I find that relatable because I haven't told you everything either. I've been focusing on the gameplay and neglecting the story. The part we just finished with saving the kid was a mini side plot about a resistance member and his son. The latter wants to fight in the war, presumably to avenge his mother, and at one point he runs off to do just that. It gets grim for a while, but it appears to have ended happily. That was just one story out of many though. The thing about the writing here is that it has several mini plot lines holding up the main theme, and if you don't pay attention to them you might find it hard to make sense of the narrative. Important characters in Hell's Highway have backstories and consistent motives. Corporal Quarian is a competent soldier presently frustrated that he hasn't made it to sergeant. Before the war, he used to work in a textile mill, so it's possible that he sees a service as a career opportunity. His squad has replacements, one of whom is Frankie, who lied about being 18 to enter the army. He means well, but he sees the war as much nobler than it is. And Sergeant Red Hartsock has a 2-year-old daughter he has never met, because he set up for war before she was born.
What's your hurry, Red?
I'd like to meet my daughter before she turns 3.
The only one not to obsess over his personal life is the protagonist himself. His only preoccupation is keeping his men alive. You can probably make more sense of the argument he had with Hartsock in light of this information. They were not necessarily talking about Cole, at least not entirely. Rather, they were expressing how they feel about potentially sharing his fate. Baker sees no higher priority than the survival of his company, but Hartsock has a very good reason to return home alive. And even though he is a good leader, he does not want to be reminded that he might have to pass on the opportunity to meet his daughter for good. While the conversation itself is about Cole, the subject is how they feel about preserving their own lives. See, I told you there's nuance, which is not to say that Baker's altruism makes him perfect. He has his own demons, and Dawson is aware of this. It all starts with Baker's gun, which is rumored to be cursed. It turns out that he didn't want it with him in the first game, and everyone who picked it up before him died holding it.
Leggett! Alan! Get the fuck!
Including his father earlier in the war. And guess who it was that originally gifted it to him?
Mom said I can't keep this. Sorry, Dad.
And I'd like to tell you why this is important, but far be it from the Germans not to come in the way of a good story. They've started bombing the city in preparation for a counterattack.
Get everybody up!
And hey, guess what? We get to push them back. Yes, it is the same suppress and flank technique, and no, it does not get old. It is basically classic COD, but with some tactical seasoning. I like the way the game handles night scenes. The contrast with the fire and flares is well done, and the ambient is just dark enough to instill some doubt about what you see, without completely disorienting you. The blinding muzzle flash adds to the effect. This time around, we have an MG squad instead of bazooka people. They're not quite as destructive, but they're the ideal suppression unit. We also get an STG-44 for a short while. Oh, and a pure defensive section. It is a nice break from constantly worrying about your company. It almost feels therapeutic. Don't be such a control freak. Stop ordering people around all the time. Relax. Live a little. Throughout this chapter, you'll encounter the occasional cinematic to show just how devastating this counterattack really is. But the primary focus is in Frankie's fate. Being the character that he is, he disobeys his corporal and he runs off to save the low-poly blonde. Do you remember this scene?
We don't have time for your shit!
Well, this is the result of Corian's failure.
What the hell are you doing?
She's in trouble. I'm faster alone. We'll never get to her as a group.
Frankie, she doesn't even speak English.
She doesn't have to.
If you run after her, you will die.
And if I don't, then what? Save as many as you want, but let me save this one.
Don't.
Let me save this one. Just one.
So Baker looks for Frankie in a burning building, which is about as fun as that sounds. He dodges a fireball, and he almost drowns immediately after. He is a man of contrasts. And this is yet another solo section, this time doing a pistol start because we're old school. It is actually fairly fun. It plays like an opening to a Wolfenstein game with its rudimentary stealth and a pistol to MP40 carnage arc. I can only rely on the guns I pick up. I'll need to conserve my ammunition. If only there was an easily accessible hand-holdy drop to replenish my stock in full. Yeah, you know where this is going. Something else I should note about the presentation here is the depiction of the Germans. Now, I'm sure most people watching this are aware that not every soldier in the German army was a Nazi. A lot of them went unwillingly, and a lot of them were swindled into signing up. Still, that does not justify what they did. Being an instrument of evil does not make you less evil, it just makes you less of an agent. And that is something that Hell's Highway depicts very well. It resists the temptation of demonizing them as mere racist lunatics, and opts for much more mature neutrality in regards to ideology. They're just soldiers following orders, and in so doing, they're complicit in crimes against humanity. So while they're not the originators of this evil, they do profit from perpetuating it. So you deserve this. They still are the unambiguous villains. They're just not the caricatures you'd expect from a modern game. But do take note of the ambient. We've gone from bright, darkening, and dark, both chaotic flickering dark in this deceptively peaceful night. So where do we go from there? What is darker than night? That's right, horror. Well, World at War did try to be creepy and it succeeded. It went for a mostly grounded, subdued kind of horror. Hell's Highway takes the horrors of war to a much more literal level. While not a full Resident Evil vibe, it really wants you to know that Baker is being haunted. Numbness by overexposure aside, this level is much creepier than you would expect from a military game. Baker eventually crosses paths with Frankie, and they have a heart-to-heart conversation. Frankie is not willing to listen to reason, and so he drops this truth bomb on his sergeant.
Don't be my dad right now. Go back. Just go back and let me save her. Please.
The next time we meet him, we're back at the beginning of the game. Now this part might look melodramatic to some, and it definitely drives the suspension of disbelief a bit too high for a mature story. But let us not miss the point on account of this one fluke in writing. I see the part leading up to this scene as just a gamified version of what would have happened were this story told in a different medium. A book or a movie would have probably had Frankie just run after the girl and die in the bombing, but a video game needs to make a level out of it. And so we have a creepy hospital shootout. It might help to look at this writing as a kind of psychological fiction. It is allowed to evoke the unlikely if it means leading the protagonist to the next stage of his emotional development, or downfall. So the purpose of this scene was to demonstrate where this burden leads Baker, and apparently it leads him nowhere sane.
There's no one there, Matt.
He didn't know. Thought he was doing the right thing. We would be better men to respect that.
Yeah, but I still died.
Yeah, he did.
Red decides to confront Baker in his mental health, but before that can happen, they're caught in an ambush. And I like this level. The rain effect is very well done. It is neither too thick nor is it a light drizzle. It is just enough to let you know you're fighting under hardened conditions. It obscures your vision enough to add chaos to battles, and once the fighting is over, it serves to remind you that not all is calm, which you would do well to remember. And you get the bazooka squad back. I especially like this section where you circle around the alleys to flank an 88, and you get to disregard European architectural heritage one more time. But the real bombshell in this part happens in a cutscene. When they eventually meet up, Red drops on Baker yet another truth bomb.
Maybe if you were in control of your men, instead of always trying to be their best friend, they wouldn't need finding.
And speaking of bombs, and if you think that my jokes today are a punishable offense, remember that it is my video. I can be as flippant as I want. But yes, it is a serious turn of events. For how skilled in Red's condition is, as of right now, unknown.
I need you to breathe for me.
Red, you can breathe, you just gotta try.
Corian.
He's not dead, don't fucking say it!
Baker suffers even more damage to his sanity, and it appears that Corian saved the day, or at least part of it.
Come on, Red!
Which makes it all the more bizarre when, at the end of the level, Baker denies him the promotion to sergeant. When asked to recommend a replacement for Hartsock, Baker chooses Corporal Paddock instead.
Are you sure, son?
I'm sure, sir.
Corian is expectedly livid, and Baker's reason for doing so is not very well stated.
Corporal! To you!
What?
It's my job to keep you alive. You follow orders or you die. Those are your words. I heard you say them to Frankie. Right to his face, and he died in my fucking arms because you couldn't make him understand.
As of right now, both Paddock and Corian are equally competent fighters. The only difference is being that, whereas Corian is a dark loner, Paddock is a sociable goof. And while Corian was with Baker in the first game, Paddock did not show up until Earned in Blood. So what gives? Did Baker make a mistake? Is he really losing it? Did he have a reason we don't know about? Or maybe he was just too annoyed by the tank battle from earlier. Now, tanks in World War II games are kind of like mini-bosses. Impervious to most attacks, they are more powerful than infantry, which includes the player, so it is up to the player to find a way to outmaneuver them. So what are we waiting for? Let's go. First, to get my hands on conveniently placed anti-tank weapons, base of fire team, you provide covering fire, bazooka squad, you're with me on the flank. And there's the tank. So the first rocket landed, now the second. That is a good reload animation, by the way. The detail with the wire is something you don't usually see. Can you move away, please? I can't fire through you. Okay, apparently I can, and wait, what's that? A tank has snuck up on us. It is one of those stealthy, sneaky, quiet kinds of tanks. Yes, that splash damage took out a friendly, but you know what they say. All is fair in jank and war. Then go back to refuel the rocket launcher, take out the other tank, and there's my team. No, those are German uniforms. Their AI is just too stupid to attack me. Yeah, the jank lid has fully come off. And guess what? Another tank segment. That's right, you get to see an enemy marker, and then you get to shoot the enemy marker until there is no enemy marker. These tank sections are strangely boring from how destructive they are. Corian gets wounded in the next chapter, which happens to be titled Hell's Highway. That's right, the titular title. And it is here that the game peaks with the ambient, bringing forth a total hellish red lighting. This is chaos incarnate, and fitting for a conclusive chapter. Hell's Highway, Hell's Lighting, and Hell's Carnage. And Hell's Jank. It is at this point that it had to concede. Suppressing and flanking is a suggestion, not a core game mechanic. It is entirely possible to use your units as a mere base of fire, and to go on playing the game like any other shooter. The enemy will not try to flank you, they cannot use grenades, and unless you're behind destructible cover, you and your troops can stay where you are indefinitely. As such, you can occasionally pop out of cover, take a potshot or two, and go back into cover. It begins to look a lot like Call of Duty, except sloppily executed. Which is actually a convenient counter to another piece of jank, because your squad can randomly decide they will not shoot at the enemy.
Don't stop firing! All right, let's give them what we got! Position! Firing!
So without that essential suppressive fire, your only means of victory is to shoot everybody on your own. And I think this might be a good time to talk about the gunplay. Now on the surface, it is serviceable. It tries to go for some realism by having the player's hands shake and sway, which makes it harder to aim. I like that. What I don't like so much is that the weapons are hit scan, and the tracer effect lags well behind what is supposed to be the effect of what would be the bullet. And unless you land a kill shot, the enemy will not react, not so much as a flinch. And the bar behaves more like a submachine gun than as a proto-assault rifle. Now this could be a matter of balancing, and a lot of games do that to an extent, but it feels weird in a game that claims to prioritize realism. There are many other ways to balance the weapons, the best of which was probably to just limit the player's ammunition. But guess what? 20 bullets? $20 magazines. Baker is walking around with 20 drum barrel magazines. That is 50 bullets per mag, and 1,000 bullets in total. That is for one weapon alone. And if you still manage to run out of ammunition, there are supply drops scattered across each level, so you can refuel at just about any point. But at least you can get an STG-44. And yes, just like in any other World War II game, it is the secret BFG. You eventually get to a point where you need to make a stand against an advancing German army, and this is kind of like the battle for Hill 400 from COD 2, except that Hill 400 is immeasurably better. The first time around it does feel epic, but once you realize what you need to do, it almost becomes a joke. You suppress the tank, put a charge on the tank, and sprint to safety. You do this 3 times, then just retreat behind cover and look busy. Friendly forces arrive to bail you out, and the moments that follow redeem every flaw I've mentioned about the gameplay so far. While the problems still stand, there is something in the narrative that greatly solidifies the experience. For one, we get a great visual presentation of what is going on in Baker's mind, and 2, we get an insight into his decision to promote Paddock instead of Quarian.
Is there something troubling you? Besides the obvious, of course?
At the poker game in England, when we were in that fight, I said some shit. I was just trying to point out if we went in as is, Martian fire, we're gonna bite it. Everybody got 4 colors of pissed about it. I was just trying to help point out a hole in our unit. I didn't mean to say it so cruel. God, feels like I killed him myself.
Are you looking for absolution?
Does that mean forgiveness?
I don't believe we are the ones you need forgiveness from.
Okay, would a braggart farmer hothead be this deep?
You still can't tell.
Probably not, but keep in mind he is 21 and he just walked into a massive responsibility by being promoted to sergeant. It is not that unlikely he would undergo a change of character as a result, and this prompts Baker to confess his own mistake.
There's something else. Something I've been holding on to for a long time. And you're not gonna like it.
What is it?
I'm so sorry.
Leggett, what happened?
In the previous game, there were 3 soldiers in the company who were not getting along well at all. Out on patrol, they lost their tempers, and through a rash reaction on Leggett's part, they were set upon by Germans.
Hey, Germans! We're over here! Come kill us!
I'm sorry, Kevin.
Baker!
And this is the advice Baker gave to the sole survivor.
Don't ever tell anyone what you just told me.
Why?
Because they'll kill you.
You see, Leggett was not a popular character in Road to Hill 30. He was weird and disliked, and he likely got bullied. So yes, keeping this a secret was probably the right choice. Until the pent-up guilt led him to commit suicide by baiting the German tank. And look what his ghost tells Baker in the dream.
Now this looks familiar. Well, I think you're losing it.
What do?
Find it.
So apparently that was not the last level. When I replayed this, I was genuinely surprised that the previous level was not the ending of the game. The presentation looked just epic enough to be a final level, and that is how I remembered it for over a decade. Now I have 3 squads under my command, and this level is amazing. It is everything good I've said about the gameplay so far, but bigger. It has an open design, so there are multiple ways to approach objectives. The subtle, natural verticality allows for a better view of the battlefield, and enemy crossfire combined with their 88s adds challenge. The extra squad makes a huge difference too. On this map, it is possible to stay in cover and just command your units. With the right guidance, they will do the bulk of the work. This level is a joy to play through. It almost feels like the game has finally begun after a 6-hour-long tutorial section. This is peak Brothers in Arms, almost like Road to Hill 30, but modernized. Not only does it do just about everything right, but it also made me realize the design philosophy behind the gameplay. Granted, it has been made easier to appeal to a wider demographic, and yes, it does feel casual in many regards, but this does not mean that it has lost its tactical character. In this regard, it is comparable to Dishonored 2. In case you're not familiar with Dishonored 2, it was a stealth game with outstanding level design that some people disliked because reasons. A criticism that often came up was that it was too easy not to play with stealth, or at least not to play non-lethally. And yes, causing carnage is much easier, but the real charm of the game is related to the stealth mechanics. So the temptation will always be there, and you will occasionally find yourself going lethal, especially with NPCs like these.
He's done terrible things, sometimes under orders, sometimes just to see what would happen.
But you would not call it a bad stealth game on account that stealth is optional. It still remains the best way to play, and the same applies to Hell's Highway. If you want to command your units and watch them take out the enemy, you're playing the game the right way. But if you don't feel up to the challenge, or if you happen to mess up, there is an easier way. Although a full action playthrough will make you miss out on the unique mechanic that makes the game what it is not necessarily the wrong way to play. And you can always combine the two to maximize the entertainment value. Ideally, you want to play as a commander and support. Stick to commanding when you can, but remember to engage the enemy if necessary. If an enemy squad needs extra suppression while your assault team advances, you can provide that extra suppression, at least until you've accidentally killed said enemy. If an enemy soldier needs to be taken out and your squads can't reach him, you can act as a designated marksman, and keep in mind the human player is the most versatile flanking unit. This part is incredibly well done, and I can't wait to see what other levels the game has in store.
Mac, I said I got it. Of course you do. Take one of the tanks with you at least.
So we get to command a tank. Nope, we get to control a tank. Again. But you know what? I feel too good about the previous level, so I will tolerate this one. I also like this snappy sound effect when you run over something. I'm just looking forward to the next infantry mission. So you clear the village, there are a few cutscenes, and the game ends. Yes, that was the last level. A generic tank mission. I'm getting Metal Gear Solid 5 vibes. The epic level was not the final level, the game ends abruptly just as it begins to open up, and the actual final level does not feel final, and it barely qualifies as a level. I'm tempted to say it was rushed, but Hell's Highway was actually delayed. so it was probably a budget issue. While the story does conclude, the gameplay section leading up to it cannot be what was originally planned. This is only one step above. Congratulations, this story's happy end. Thank you, from Ghosts and Goblins. This might not have been such a problem if Gearbox released a DLC level pack afterwards, but as it is, this is a short game that ends just as the fun factor reaches its peak. Sure, you can replay it on a harder difficulty, but that is just the same game minus quality of life HUD elements. And nothing beats that pre-final mission with the 88s. Once you've played it, you want more of it. 3 teams, open levels, and multi-angle objectives. It is the best by far, and there is only one, by far. The gameplay just about delivers, and then it pulls a Konami on you. The story, though, is what ultimately redeems it. The final cinematic is the crown on the otherwise average person who had the potential to do more but didn't, probably because he didn't have the budget to put in the extra work, however he still got to be king. I have not played any other military shooter with this kind of elaborate conclusion. So back in Uden, we find out that Hartsock will not be able to walk again. It is a well-written and competently performed dramatic moment, but the part I want you to see is what happens next.
There's not much to say about me, Matthew. I was weak and frail and was crushed by a secret you told me to keep.
I was protecting you.
Is this the same protection you offered Frankie?
After an episode of trying to reason with his own hallucination, Bakers goes on to get his sanity back by means of a dramatic speech.
I think you should slow down.
Can't, people to see.
Let's hear it.
All right, everyone, fall in on me. Let's move it.
Man, it's been 10 days, and there's not a man among us who didn't give everything he had. Some gave more. We lost Frankie, Fryer, and Marsh, and Red. The collapse broke part of his back, paralyzed him. He won't ever walk again. He can talk. And you know what he said? He asked me if any of us were worth it. We've all made mistakes. We've all questioned what we're doing here. And we all feel burdened by the cost of the fight, especially in the face of defeat. But I'm not retreating. I'm standing alongside of all of you. I'm still standing right here. I'll walk us straight into Berlin if it's asked of us, and it probably will be. And I know some of you don't trust me right now. Some of you are clinging to superstition. That ends right now. I know we feel like we need something to blame, but it's just a goddamn gun. So here we are. Brothers, fathers, saints, and sinners. Let's bring this fight back to the Germans.
Well, shit. If you're gonna use all them pretty words.
I can't. What is it that makes a great soldier? Is it his brain? Or his heart?
So what just happened there? It sounds nice, but it isn't that good. The game opens with a cliched question, it develops as a standard war drama, and it ends with a sentimental scene that clarifies nothing. Well, not so fast. Now, there are 3 ways of looking at this part. One of them is as just a cool speech that doesn't really mean anything. But I think that kind of criticism would be a bit unfair. The game has already established how much attention it devotes to its characters, so if we see a parallel that points to character development, it is probably not a coincidence. And here's one. The first monologue, chronologically, of the first game begins like so.
I never asked to be squad leader, but I had no choice. Now I've got 13 soldiers under my command. 13 men depending on me to make the right decisions and not get them killed. 13 families relying on me to bring their husbands and sons home.
And one of the concluding lines in the as of 15 years ago and running last game in the series is this.
I'm still standing right here.
I'll walk us straight into Berlin if it's asked of us, and it probably will be.
It is a full character arc, an evolution from tacitly taking on duty to fully accepting it. In that sense, this part plays out like a coming-of-age story, and a lot of 4 drama does tackle that motif. But there's more. Pay attention to this part.
We feel like we need something to blame, but it's just a goddamn gun.
So what is Baker saying there? Don't you know it's just a gun? I'm not like you superstitious nerds. I'm a man of science, like a redditor with a t-shirt. Not at all. The gun is actually the bridge or the border between Baker's finally coming to terms with reality and his succumbing to his guilt.
Now this looks familiar. It would appear we have much more in common than you'd originally thought. Bulletproof Matt Baker, reduced to tears at the loss of a friend.
It's not the same.
Well, that's the rub, isn't it? It is the same.
Want proof? It is overtly established that Baker struggles with reality. Literally, he cannot tell what is real and what is not. And whenever he hallucinates, he is canonically holding the gun. And much more than a mere legend, it is a piece of family heirloom. It was a gift from his father. On it is engraved the phrase brothers in arms, and it was the last thing held by people whom he regarded as his family. Do you see where this is going? Yes, the object is just a gun, but getting rid of the gun is getting rid of more than the object itself. To him, it is an imposed legacy up to which he feels he has failed to live up. The casualties in this campaign were mostly a matter of chance, and what most people would blame on misfortune, Baker blames on himself. Now, if one definition of superstition is the assigning of agency to instances that have none, the superstition in his case is not the cursed pistol, but Baker's perception of himself, namely the self-defeating conviction that one can make everything right.
There's not much to say about me, Matthew. I was weak and frail and was crushed by a secret you told me to keep.
I was protecting you.
Is this the same protection you offered Frankie? He trusted in you, Matthew. Much as the others did. But they aren't here either. Exactly how much is your protection worth?
This story does not have a conventional villain. The only antagonist is the protagonist himself. Note that whenever Baker argues with Leggett, he is actually arguing with himself. And throwing away the gun means letting go of the things that feed this self-generating villainy. So I meant it when I said that he gets his sanity back by means of a dramatic speech. The things he says are not just for the company. He is largely trying to convince himself.
But it's just a goddamn gun.
But why did Corian walk away? Well, implicitly because he does not understand what it is that makes a great soldier.
Is it his brain? Or his heart?
Now, being a tactical shooter, it does not downplay the role of the brain, but the story itself keeps pointing not to great feats of tactical brilliance as much as the struggle to keep the company alive, both literally and in the sense that their spirits are broken for the second half of the game. That is the true test of Baker's leadership, and it is a battle of the heart. And do note that if you equate heart with sentiment, you'd be selling the metaphor short. As a matter of fact, Corian is not incapable of feeling emotions, and neither were Frankie and Leggett. The heart can also stand for love and courage and passion. It can be used to convey both great sadness and great joy, and it is a metaphorical metric for one's moral allegiance. Lastly, note that its primary function is to keep the organism alive. So when Baker asks what makes a great soldier, he does not ask what makes a great warrior or a great hero, not what makes a great distinct individual in isolation, but what makes a great individual in a unit. And the answer is the life of the unit. As long as he can keep the unit alive, which he does through love and courage and compassion, he is one of its great individuals. So no, a great soldier is not perfect, nor does he need to be. He will make mistakes, and he will even come to strong disagreements with his company. But the thing that keeps the unit alive is that they will push through, provided they all agree on the one thing that matters. That they have heart, and that their hearts are in the right place.
Well, shit. If you're gonna use all them pretty words.
Which is a good summary for the game as a whole. It has heart, and its heart is in the right place. It definitely does mess up. It messes up a lot, but at its core it tries to tell a great story in a unique format. Sure, I could choose to focus on how clunky it feels at times, and how you can just play it as a bargain bin Call of Duty, and I can even criticize the story. It is too sentimental, parts of it feel contrived, extremely contrived, and you can easily miss the point. but for all of its simplifications, the gameplay still offers the standard Brothers in Arms experience if you want to play it as a Brothers in Arms game. And while it would change some things in the writing, especially the rabbit hole chapter, the story itself is amazing. It is the video game response to Band of Brothers. It follows multiple characters in two separate but related themes, and it does it so smoothly that they're easy to miss if you don't look for them.
Scheiße! Ein Zebra!
The zebra is a fierce swordfish.
There are many better World War II shooters, and if you're into World War II games, you've probably played them already. But Hell's Highway is unique in areas where they don't even qualify, and it is just competent enough to pull it off. And that is what makes it one of the greats. It is a good game not because of its polish, but because for all of its flaws, it is something in common with great soldiers. It's a wreck. I just hope to see a sequel sometime soon. Hopefully they won't make a spin-off that has absolutely nothing to do with the Brothers in Arms, but is instead a Left 4 Dead wannabe so bad it gets cancelled, followed by a bunch of mobile games. Bruh. So that has been Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway. Now as I conclude, I usually say whether or not I recommend the game I'm covering, and considering I told you how it ends, that implies I do not expect people to play this. It is just too dated and too clunky and too devoid of content to be worth the purchase. Which is not the same as saying I do not recommend it, it's just that I don't think most people would want it. But in case it got your interest, I deliberately left out some bits of the story, so there will be a few scenes that will still be new to you, should you decide to play it. And if you're wondering if you should play the two that came before Hell's Highway, then I'd say you probably should. They actually play much better if you like the suppress and flank format. This is a one-of-a-kind series that deserves a lot more attention. Hence the video. A lot can be done with these mechanics, especially if they're revived in a game that uses modern technology, and the story is in a league of its own, with Hell's Highway being where the narrative peaks. If you are familiar with these games, I hope you agree, and if this is your first time hearing about them, then I hope you now have a new appreciation for what is becoming a modern gem. I will here thank the 5 people who have subscribed since my last upload, and even more so those of you who are enjoying the literature. I mentioned one of my novels earlier. It comes with the territory as classic science fiction. If you like H.G. Wells, you will probably like the setting in this one. Or if you would prefer a highbrow metaphysical mystery suspense novel, consider The Playwright. This one is a modern ghost story. And if you like World War II settings, it actually has some callbacks you might find interesting. And for those who would prefer a shorter read, A Righteous Agenda is a subversive mystery, and the Chapbooks Trilogy is a poetry collection plus 3 essays. I've published both print and digital. Major stores are linked in the description. So, finally concluding this longish video that I decided to do in the spur of the moment, and here's to hoping for another successful monthly upload. Take care, have a great rest of your day, and remember, what is it that makes a great soldier? It is the IDMA. Ridma books.
So much had happened.
Peace.
And we were just getting started.